artists like, oh, I draw really, really well. Okay, good. So why should we buy your work? Stop moaning about it. Okay, just because you draw doesn't mean people will buy your work.
Welcome to Creative Insanity. Creative Insanity.
Hey, I'm Servant, a rap artist, producer, and a bunch of other things from Alberta, Canada, and today my guest is the lovely and lively Marta Madison. Marta is a fashion illustrator from Sydney, Australia, and today she launches her new book, Girl Can Draw, which is a beautiful collection of fashion illustrations, pro tips to increase your skills as an illustrator, and vignettes about the joys and challenges of freelancing. We discuss her experience as a successful commissioned artist, the world of bridal fashion, and what she's learned along the way to keep sane. We relate about the importance of good communication and people skills, which are things that sadly some creatives don't spend enough time developing. I particularly enjoyed her personality, her beaming vitality from across the world, and I ain't about to spoil the whole conversation for you. So Marta Madison, welcome to Creative Insanity.
Oh, how exciting.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel creatively insane. This is a great podcast. I love the idea, I love the theme. So glad that we could connect.
Yeah.
And I really like where you go with your podcast. It's interesting to talk about the process.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And it's interesting that you're all the way on the other side of the world. In what part of Australia?
I live in Sydney, Australia. So it's the East Coast.
Okay.
And I've always lived there since the early mid-'80s. And I would eventually like to go further north into Queensland because I love the heat. But
it's not hot in Sydney?
It gets hot, but sometimes in winter it's like 12 degrees, and that's really freezing for me.
Wow. Do the tarantulas have coats?
Oh my God. The spiders are pretty epic here, as are all the bugs. But so you'll notice I have a bit of a hybrid Aussie Canadian accent, and that's from being here for quite a few years.
But you grew up in Canada, in
I
Ontario.
grew up in Canada, in Ontario, Woodstock, Ontario, outside of London. And I left Woodstock when I was about 21. And I moved to Toronto for a few years. And then I bounced all the way to Australia in about 1986. Big, epic journey. Brave.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah. Are you glad you went?
It's my spiritual home. So as much as I do love Canada and French onion soup and cornbread and autumn leaves and all that, I knew early on that I didn't want to deal with the northern winters. I suffer a lot from SAD, seasonal adjustment disorder.
Yeah.
So here, there's about 280 days of sunshine a year.
That's too many.
It's so good. I will just literally go out in the sun and I'm not a big sunbaker, but I get energized from the heat of the sun. So when I came here, I couldn't believe how much better I felt. And so that's why I just love it. Plus, I really love the people. And I love all the Aussie slang. And I became a citizen of Australia in 1994.
Wow.
Put down roots. I thought if I'm going to stay, and if I'm an Aussie, I'll say stay.
Yeah.
If I was going to stay, I decided to put down roots and become a citizen. I really love the idea of the voting and being the democracy that it is. So I just love it.
No, I love that. So let's jump into your story a little bit. Basically, we started that you're in Canada and you get along the way, but who are you as an artist? Because you are, my understanding is, a bit of an illustrator and like fashion and weddings and there's some pictures right there behind you. I think normally I say this till later, but I think I'm going to pull it up right now. I've got a little video from you that kind of shows some of your artwork, and we'll talk over it, but I'm going to share my screen here.
Okay.
And you should see this as well as my viewers, and I'm going to just press play. And maybe you could talk a little bit about what you do as an artist, and then we'll dive into how and
Yeah.
why.
Okay. So I put this as this is a book trailer because girl has to have a good book trailer for her book. Girl Can Draw, and I put together a few of my illustrations. I'm quite diverse in what I draw. It's primarily fashion and primarily figurative. I have dabbled in landscape and sculpture in the past, but I decided to focus on bridal illustration because I absolutely love bridal gowns.
There you
I
are.
have done all types of fashion though, but currently I really do focus a lot on bridal gowns, doing bridal portraits for people, but a lot of high-end haute couture type illustration work, including shoes and accessories and all that. So yeah, so this is just a quick snapshot of some of my work. And I also do editorial type illustration like this one, which is fashion, but it's also telling a story, as
Yeah, I
most of
love
my,
that.
yeah, and pastel, watercolor, pencil, and I'm hand drawn. So I don't do a lot of digital work. And these are all done by hand. And I remember some people saying, wow, you draw by hand with a pencil?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's
it is
getting,
old school. So there's something about the pencil work that brings a vibrancy and immediacy that I haven't yet sort of achieved with digital.
yeah.
If I do digital, I will do a drawing first and then I might add brushes or something, a background in Photoshop.
Yeah.
But just love it's what I grew up with. So yeah.
Well, I
Yeah,
love it. It's a very
thank you.
interesting. I'm always fascinated when I talk to artists who in the visual arts because
Mm,
it's not a strength of mine whatsoever. I think at best I have a sense of composition, but I do
mm.
you draw things from? Okay, no, we're getting a process. Let's step back a little bit. Why do you do this kind of art?
Um, well, when I started out, I just started drawing ladies, and my mother was a fashion illustrator, but she put her pencils and pens away when she got married in the 50s. So I never saw her draw. So when I started I was drawing girls based on my Barbie dolls. So they all have big boobs, That's what I was drawing. And they were like, oh, she's drawing.
Right.
And then I went to a good high school where I developed some techniques. But I always loved figurative work. I've always liked it. So it's like I found drawing bodies easy, but I didn't find drawing trees easy. So there's part of the brain that went, you can do bodies, but maybe you need more work on practicing trees.
Yeah.
So I didn't go into landscape. So that is how the brain works, is what comes easy you tend to focus on, and then you improve that. Like I would love to do pure mathematics. Ain't gonna happen.
No, me
Can't.
either.
Calculators were a blessing for me. Like, so God gives us each some sort of unique thing. So for me to try and teach somebody what I do, I find it difficult because it simply just comes out of my hand. And when you look in the book, you'll see a range of different styles, because on the day, I'm not quite sure which body will come out. So also a reason I do what I do is because I have these flashes or visions that pop into my head. And that's a really great basis for a drawing. So I'll sort of quickly sketch them down and then I'll work that up. So that's another sort of kind of weird spiritual connection with the higher power sort of thing that just gives me these things in my head.
It's like
which
inspiration.
I'm really grateful for. That's, not many people have that, but a lot of artists do. They get the inspiration. And I think you need to work on your craft in order to get your inspiration. Some people are lucky inventors, you know what I mean? Eureka!
Yeah.
But unless you're doing the thing constantly, it's very rare to get a perfectly formed idea or something in your head.
That's interesting. I like how you specify it's like craft first, followed by
Yes.
inspiration or vision. And because
Yes.
I can relate to that as a musical artist, because I could imagine songs, growing up, or ideas in my head for, it would all sound like this. But when I became more technically inclined as a producer to be able to do that kind of stuff, I think the specificity of my vision as a songwriter improved
Hmm.
as well because,
Hmm.
things, I guess I could attack it, you know what I mean? And it sounds like that's what you're saying is you got to build the craft up. And another thing that it reminds me of is, do you know a writer named Flannery O'Connor? Okay, so Flannery O'Connor she wrote for 3 hours a day, every day, basically, until she died. And she had a philosophy that she had to show up the same time of day, sit at the typewriter, same 3 hours, because she was training the muse, she was training inspiration to show up at that time. She was teaching it that I'm going to be there and you're going to be there. And if it doesn't show up, that's fine. But it was an interesting philosophy. It's like, oh, okay, like craft and discipline
Yes.
influences
Yes.
inspiration. So I like that.
The main word that I pick from that is discipline,
Hmm.
because those who show up produce. And I put the Sister Carita's rules in there, and she was Sister Carita Kent. She was a very forward-thinking artist who worked in a convent school in Los Angeles. And she wrote the rules as part of a project. And she says, show up for class. It's the people that actually do the work that get the ideas, and things happen around them simply because they show up. They're present. They're able to, you never know. At class, you might miss that one thing, that key that's going to give you the bridge to where you want to be.
Yeah.
So you're a slacker, you can't expect stuff to happen. And this is the thing with the modern sort of Instagram and posting and all that. It's a lot. For me, what I see is a lot of image management and a lot of perfection. And that's not true in the artistic world. There's a lot of mistakes and spilled coffee and crumpled up paper.
Yeah.
And you get one good sketch out of 10. So I write about a couple of things like that, where some days the gods are with me and I put down a nearly perfect line. And I'm like, oh my God, that's gold. And I just go, that's good. I've nailed it.
Yeah.
And other days I'll do a drawing and I'm like, scribble. Yeah. It's like I'm back being 2 years old. I can't get it. So there's a combination of, like you say, discipline equals inspiration. And you are what you think. So if you're thinking music, because I'm always amazed, because I'm trying to learn the cello.
Oh, wow.
And that's working yet another part of my brain. And I'm sort of self-teaching myself, but I'm going to get some tuition. But I can pick it up, because to me, it's like I understand where the notes go now and how that relates to my fingers. But I don't understand how people compose and compose layers. I'm big into the Beach Boys compositions and the Beatles compositions, because they are masterful layering. Yeah. And I just love all that. And I don't get how Beethoven was able to hear all that symphonies, even though technically he was, losing his hearing. I don't believe he went totally deaf, but he was losing. But he could hear symphonies. And so they could separate out each instrument and have a complete symphony with that instrument and then blend it together. I think that's the gift I would love.
Yeah.
But I wanted to use the word preternatural forever, because I love that word. And I thought, I just love the idea of waking up with a fully formed drawing in my head, which I have done. And Paul McCartney apparently woke up with the tune for Yesterday from a dream.
Interesting.
And he sort of, legend goes, he sort of staggered to the piano and plunked out the notes, because if he hadn't, it would have been gone. Yeah, I can relate. Have you ever had that? Like,
oh yeah, where I've dreamt things, tunes sometimes. Once in a while too, like, a tune just sort of comes to me, and
Yeah.
I have to race to record it on my
Yes.
phone or something like that. But for me, it's the work very often that most of my stuff comes out of. Inspiration's great, but I sit down a piano and I work my ass off, and I come up with stuff that you say, like these layers. I see that in the
Uh,
visual arts, like what you do as well, because I was looking at an artist who I really admires his Instagram, guy named Caesar Santos, and he's just
oh
got
yeah.
this great big beard, and he's really interesting, and he's doing, like, I think oil paintings, oil on canvas or something, and it was like a little fast video, rapid cutting through his process of
Yeah.
one thing. And it starts with a blank page, and he's adding layer upon layer upon layer. And then at the end, it looks better than a real photo. It looks like a moment. And I wonder, how do you do that? And that's one of the things that fascinates me, is the parallel between the visual arts and the non-visual arts.
Mm,
It's like a different dialect of the same language.
yes, I agree. And you're constantly talking to yourself through that process. So what Césaire would have is he has his template of how he does it.
Hmm.
And it's very true with oils and watercolor. You do layer, definitely. And you have to work on your highlights, shadows, your darks and lights. And that's the thing with a lot of Instagram photos and things, you see the finished process. But underneath is a lot of years of how do I get to that process? It's a lot easier now because there's so many YouTube
Right.
tutorials.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Yes. So back in the day, you went to art school and you learned certain techniques. And then today it's a whole other ballgame of how do I learn how to do something? And you can go and see these fast forward, slow motion, whatever type of takes.
Hmm.
And it's been very helpful. It really helped me when I was starting out because I had huge gaps in my knowledge because I actually stopped drawing when I got to Australia. And I didn't know how to be an artist. I didn't have a clue. So I just gave it up. I just went, I'll be a graphic designer and that'll do. Because I didn't know how you
Huh.
got to be a paid artist. And nobody mentored me. And which was very similar to my mom. She came out of
Right.
art
Yeah,
school.
I was going to say.
No contacts, not in 1948, 49. Most women didn't work, never mind be a commercial artist.
Mm.
Very few in the 50s. So without any sort of social or artistic supports, she just had the kids. And, I saw a lot of sort of maybe sadness around that, not being able to have those dreams. But the funny thing is when I came to Australia, I didn't either. And I didn't have internet. I didn't get it. So I kind of went to a few classes and it helped me understand. But it's only been in the last 12 years or whatever where I had access to internet. And I was slow on the uptake. I didn't even start looking at YouTube videos till 2010. What was I doing? I
That's okay.
did go to. I did actually go to the National Art School had evening classes up the road where I used to live, and I did quite a few classes there. Still not a lot of figurative, but it was fun to do sculpture, landscaping, and learn a bit about color.
Mm.
But yeah, it was only since 2012 where I went, oh my God, I could go online and I could learn.
Yeah.
And some of these guys are very generous with their time to teach, online.
Mm-hmm.
And I watch these videos too, and I'm like, do that color of the hair, that skin, it's so good. But that's their style.
Yeah.
And you got to create your own style. And that comes through practice, 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 practice.
Yeah. Practice and discovery, I imagine. So, okay.
Yes.
So you went through this period of, I was going to say wandering in the desert kind of thing.
But, wilderness years,
yeah,
I call them.
The wilderness years. I like that better. When did you decide to get serious about it? When, like, even as younger, like, when were you serious about art? When did you realize you could be serious about it?
Well, the time when I left school, because I was quite fortunate in my small, very country type hometown. It's only 25,000 people in Woodstock, and there is surrounded by a lot of farms.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a very tight community, and there were sort of three main high schools. And my natural progression was to go to one, which is quite sport orientated, but they did have a musical element, and I was learning viola. So at about 14, just before I was to go to high school, I just announced to my parents, you're going to actually enroll me across town into this really funky high school that has 2 hours of art a day. Right? Are we good with that? Because I was quite bossy, but I was very resourceful because I went 2 hours of art a day. I'm so in there. And it was really unheard of to enroll out of your district.
Yeah.
It was a bus ride away, but still I wasn't meant to go to this school. And I'm forever grateful for my parents to go, all right, just to shut her up. We'll get her enrolled there. And I had 4 years of art and, mixing all different groups of people, and ended up being a very uncoordinated cheerleader. I don't even know what I was doing there. And then yet I was having the occasional cigarette out the back, so I was kind of going amidst all groups, but I was so devoted to this art classes. And it was run by 3 legendary guys who managed to get the school board to help them build this massive 2-3 level mezzanine for paper mache, floats. We did and lettering. It was unbelievable. And I'm sure these guys, and I honor them in the book, I do talk about them. I'm sure these, guys were like, oh, these small town. Oh, I hope one of them or 2 of them makes something of themselves.
Right.
Because we were tearaways, this was during the 70s. But they were really, really, they could see I had something, and they were saying, please knuckle down because we think you have something. And I was like, ooh, somebody's really taking notice. And I did. And at the end of my 4 years there, I was editor of the yearbook, and I had, really put together a nice little portfolio. And then they said, well, you can go to Fanshawe College, which is in London, and take fashion illustration, because it was obvious that's what I wanted to do. However, I went there, old bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, going, I'm here, I'd like to enroll. And they said, oh, we don't have any course. There's not enough interest.
Oh.
Like 18, I was like, oh, what am I going to do? So the course administrator was so great. I've had all these lucky intersections of luck and kindness where I must have looked so crestfallen. It's another word I love, crestfallen.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And she said, look, hun, just take your drawings over to, one of your local lady shops and see if they'll take you on, and you can do some drawing for them for maybe the local newspaper. I went, okay, I'll do that. And then I did. And there was a lady shop in Woodstock, and they said, yeah, we'll take you on as an illustrator.
Wow. Just walking in that 18 years
Walked
old.
right in. And I mean, I had to do sales for I was full-time salesperson, and that wasn't always more as stimulating as I would like.
Right.
But I got a chance to sit in the dusty back room and do some sketches, and I so wish I'd kept some of them, but I haven't. And that was just one of the instances where I started to feel, well, I've made it. And my drawings were probably absolute crap back then, but I thought, this is how you do it. You don't have to go to university. There you go. And then from there, I stayed there 2 years, and then I had another year in town, but that job ended. And then I went to the Globe and Mail newspaper in Toronto. I moved there by myself with I had 2 friends I lived with, and I started work as a telemarketing assistant. And again, luck. I thought, I'm going to be a little bit cunning here. And I went to the art department and I said, I can draw. And is there any way some of the clients might like some illustrations for their ads? Sure.
Oh,
Give us
great.
your illustrations. So I was a salesperson by day, and then I would go home and I draw these little ads, which are in the book, which are from the 80s.
Right
And
on.
I was drawing these great dresses from the 80s for top fashion places. And Toronto. So I thought, done and dusted. But in that time, I had actually gone to George Brown College to do night class to learn the proper fashion illustration techniques. So I had finally realized that I could get some sort of diploma or something in illustration technique, which I did.
Yeah. So seems like you took education very seriously, but
Always.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, even if it was non-traditional, you realize the importance of always learning. And you say that you
Yes.
were very lucky, and that the fortune of the kindness of strangers was something that helped you along. And
Yes.
while I know that's true, there's also an element of you presenting yourself in the right place at the right time, and some of that is discipline and habit. And yeah, so like you wouldn't have got the opportunity to start drawing some fashion drawings even while you were doing sales if you didn't go and ask. I have a very similar experience. I also write as well.
Yeah.
I went to a local paper in a small town, 10,000 people, where I grew
Yeah.
up. It's like 45 minutes away from here. And I walked in, and I was, I think, 18 at the time. And I said, "Hey, I would like to write. Can I do that for you in any way?" And they don't get paid a lot to write. And
Yeah.
I offered to do it for free. So they were like, "Okay, we'll give you something." And I wound up writing some columns, and then they sent me off to take pictures and, talk to some artists and things like that. And it was really valuable experience. And while I didn't do it for too long, I was, I think, stunned at just how you could ask for something and it would happen. That's been a theme in my life for sure. So yeah, I really like that. You were hustling. How was your mental health like at that time? Were you really excited about this? Was it keeping you afloat, or do you wish you had more
It
time for
was
it?
I always think I started to feel very lucky. And so I thought, I'm going to ride this sort of luck wave. And then somebody always said to me once, the answer is always no if you never ask.
I like that.
I mean, I live by that. So I am, as I said, I was very resourceful as a young person, probably seeing my mom not be as assertive as we were growing up. I embraced a lot of women's liberation in the 70s. I wasn't taking shit. And I was going to just ask for what I wanted. But also you can get a lot more with sugar than vinegar.
Right.
Another saying. So I'm always polite, and I don't test the friendship either. Like I don't take advantage. So being a rat in the Chinese horoscope, rats are they kind of look around for opportunity, and they're busy doing stuff, and they're, as I say, very resourceful.
Yeah.
So my state of being, I was very buoyant. I love that word. When people ask me today, how are you? I say, I'm buoyant. And they're like, it's an odd word, but it means you're kind of going with the flow, and you're, yes, there's ups and downs, but you're riding it.
Yeah.
And as I found, I seem to always be in sales, but I found sales, that type of hustle, very draining.
Yeah.
And I could only do those types of jobs. And I think a lot of artists find the hustle completely draining. It's not who they are. It takes them away from their art. It's like selling out, but yet nobody's buying my artwork. Well, if they don't know who you are, it's difficult they're not going to come knocking on your door. So these days, there's a lot more hustle, a lot more for people. There's, Instagram influencers, there's ways to get yourself out there. And I just approach people, but I also can write very good letters of introduction. So learning your grammar, learning to write is really important.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you said that, because I get not like so many, but I get people who, let's say, contact me, for instance, if it's related to my music or my podcast or something, that it's illegible sometimes. Or like, "Oh, great song, bro, man, I'd love to collab." and it's just, filled with like fire emojis and stuff. And I find that really, it's annoying. And it's like, the written language, if you just want to present yourself as professional, right off the hop, just learn proper grammar, because proper grammar is going to get you in the door of so many opportunities like you don't even realize. If you can just start an email with, hey there, comma, enter new paragraph. My name is so and so, and I've been introduced to your work. You start with some praise, and like if you learn it and then you end it respectfully, so and so, that gets you so much more, regardless of the content, than overt informality. And maybe informality is good in some circles, especially maybe if you're young and in certain kind of underground scenes. But
Yes.
the areas that often to make money in your craft, or the places that have the keys to these places, you got to be polite. You got to be grammatical. You got to present your best foot forward. And that's something that's literally the first time I've heard someone say that on my podcast is like
Oh,
proper grammar. And it's like, hell yeah, proper grammar.
and know the tone of the person you're writing to. And yeah, like don't talk down to them, but don't be too familiar, because they're running a business and you don't know them necessarily. So yeah, you get some rejections, but when I first approached someone to see if they would like me to do live sketching of their bridal stuff,
Yeah.
I was very nervous, but I gave them a personal phone call.
Yeah.
And I introduced myself, and I just put out feelers. And again, my name's Marta Madison, and I just really adore your bridal fashions, and would love to chat with you about possibly, doing some live illustration of your bridal wear. And again, luck. We were just talking about this the other day. She goes, when you rang me, she said, your voice was just so upbeat and happy. And she said to me on the phone, I'm literally trying to find an illustrator at this moment. I have the white pages open.
Wow. So that's...
And when she says, but it was your voice that just made me feel you had so much passion and professionalism. So it's very true. If you are going to reach out, yeah, like you said, do a little bit of research and expect some rejection, which I had expected when I rang. But no, it was synchronicity. So that was a weird thing. But also I followed up with a thank you email.
Yeah.
And after my first live sketching with them, I gave them a gift basket.
Oh, wow.
Because you guys treated me so beautifully. They were like angels to me. And it was amazing. And so a thank you letter, I can't tell you how far that goes with people. And it's not fake and it's not insincere. It is a common courtesy. If someone's been kind to you, you follow up with a thank you.
I like that. Well, and in today's, day and age of Instagram spontaneity, of everyone's just kind of following their 4-second attention span, I feel like the etiquette shifts around a little bit, but I have a very great example of my own life where I'm basically a do it now kind of guy, where I have, if the thought crosses my mind and I can do it right now, especially with communication, it's like, well, I better do it. And often because I'll forget otherwise. And just the other day, I sent a thank you to Nick Cherwink, who is a gentleman I had on the podcast a few podcasts ago. Because it was a great episode, but he connected me with somebody. He connected me with Meredith Bull, who I had on the episode right after him. And she's someone who's, I think, kind of taking me on a bit in a mentoring relationship. And she's given me a lot of pointers, and we've had a few conversations, and she's kept in touch. And I'm really like grateful for that connection. And so I had this thought that I was like, man, thanks to Nick. And so I was like, what the hell? Just pick up my phone. And I sent him a short paragraph of thank you. Like I said, when I'm in LA, I'm going to buy you a beer or a coffee, one of the two. and just, I really appreciate it, man. And it was genuine, like it was true, it was
Yeah.
but it was spontaneous. And I don't know, man, like I just, it definitely helps solidify a kind of, because I imagine that Nick appreciated it. He said he did. And
Yeah.
I mean, if someone was on my podcast and they sent me a message later, like, oh, thanks for having me on, that was so fun. Like, man, it makes me feel like, yeah, I ought to have them on again sometime. Like,
Oh
it's,
yeah, like a follow-up is always good. People love that.
yeah.
And I think they don't realize they love it until they realize that nobody's followed up with them before except you.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, wow. And so, I mean, I'm hoping that people will learn from this type of what we're talking about is like, I can't cut a break. Well, think about how you're actually approaching people, because people will be very helpful if you are, like I said, if you do a good letter, if you and get somebody to proof your letter, and spell check and all that. Like, it drives me crazy to have spelling mistakes, and occasionally they get through, and I go,
Yeah.
like, times but you just have to read it out loud and do all that, because that alone is the only thing someone will remember is the spelling mistakes. Sadly,
Sometimes it's very true.
it's like,
I was going to say, I'm sorry, my ADHD kicked right in there. I lost my train of thought. But, oh yeah, around the idea of communication as well, people skills. And I know that we've drifted a bit from your story, but this is
yeah,
really good stuff that I'm glad to talk about, because people skills I've discovered are probably the most important skill set to have next to your craft. And at times, your craft, let's say your success is more measured by your people skills and less by your craft, then vice versa. Does it happen where your craft is so damn good that, it just speaks to people and opportunities come out of the woodwork? Sure. Less so
if you're
nowadays.
Banksy, yes,
If you're what, sorry?
Banksy.
Banksy, yeah, like if you're that good.
Telling
But
how many people skills that we know of.
yeah, yeah. But mostly it's I think that if you were an artist like, like you when you were grade 9 or whatever, you're going to a new high school and you're experiencing all that, something that I would like to see as an education for young people, particularly young artists and creatively aspiring individuals, is an education in people skills, in how to navigate the social world and the
Yes.
utility of the social world, because it's about making genuine connections with people you really vibe with, but it's also being respectful of their time. It's about learning how much is too much communication, how much is too little, what can you ask, the kind of economy of favors, you know what I mean? Like, if someone asks you for help and you do it like, oh no problem, like, you don't need to pay me nothing, like, this will take me 20 minutes, I'll get her done for you. People remember that, and then down the road you can be like, hey,
Yeah.
would you mind making an introduction for me, or something, like,
Yes.
all of that stuff is so damn useful. It's kind of a shame that there are so many artists, and a younger version of myself who was ignorant of it and didn't know, and then felt lost, like there's no way I could navigate making connections or making people look at my work.
It is. It's a big thing, because nobody has to buy your work. It's not like we have to buy food. And why should somebody buy my work? Why? So artists are like, oh, I draw really, really well. Okay, good. So why should we buy your work? Stop moaning about it. Okay? Because just because you draw doesn't mean people will buy your work. I always thought art galleries were this strange confluence of, I have $1,100 in my pocket, cash. I walk by an art gallery. Ooh, I go in, and at that moment, your painting is what I need. Here's that is just about how rare things are for artists, right? So with galleries, you're trying to get people to come in to buy, but unless they've got some sort of subjective and emotional connection to your work, they might think about it. It's very rare, the spontaneous purchase. I must have it. So that is where the struggle for the artist is. So the whole thing about building your following, connecting with your potential clients. That's relatively new because in the old days, you had an art gallery represent you and they did all that work. Back in the people went to a gallery, you had an exhibition, you sold a few paintings, you went back to your studio, rinse and repeat. These days, that is flipped on its head where you are selling through Instagram, you are selling through other avenues, and you don't need necessarily a gallery. So you are the galleryist, which is a whole subset of skills. It's negotiating with people. It's socializing, getting them into a group setting, possibly negotiating with them by email about purchases. So that's a whole thing that I think the younger ones really embrace. They got that, but the sort of middle-aged artist is not quite there yet.
Yeah, it's tough for anybody who's been doing something one way for a long time. And you know what? Direct corollary in the music industry, labels would represent your musical artist.
Oh yeah.
And now everybody's independent. While there are labels out there, most of them suck. And I mean that real nicely. It's the nicest way I could put it. Most of them suck. They're going to rob you sideways for your work and take total advantage. And half the time, they're not even going to do anything that you couldn't do on your own. There are exceptions.
Yes.
But the artist dream that I had when I was a kid was like, oh yeah, you make great music, someone sees it, they you go perform somewhere, they jump up out of the crowd and say, you're the guy I've been looking for. We're going to sign you to whatever record label and we're going to get your stuff, vinyls and everything. It's going to be crazy. It's just not how it is. You're a full contact artist as an independent, and now you'll actually make more money doing that if you do it great, because you own your masters for music. Like there's so much that you have. And then I imagine for an independent artist, like an actual visual artist,
yes,
you don't have a middleman taking some of the money. Let's say if you sell a commission or something, right?
Oh, and see, there's a big thing here in Australia, and I'm going to come back to the Box Tops, because the Box Tops were a band.
Okay.
Sang the song about "Give me a letter, 'cause my baby gonna live without me no more." And I was watching them, and they went broke, completely ripped off completely devastated by the label they were on. And so Alex Chilton was the lead singer at 16. He'd already had like a super #1 hit in 1966. And said by the time we figured out we had no money, we were so jack of touring that we just disbanded. And they made millions for their record company. And the same with Badfinger. Was so many. Badfinger, 2 of the band members suicided because they could never get their money, never get their royalties. And there's a whole, most of them are the bands from the 60s and early 70s. They just couldn't navigate that. But you're right, that whole thing of I will be seen, they will come to me, I will sell. And in Australia, there's this way of galleries now. Yeah, I've not ever done this because I can't economically justify. They often have like what's called a pop-up empty space. And for a weekly rent of sometimes upwards of $2,000 you pay, you can put your pictures up. But you have to have an opening night, which you pay for. You have to man the front desk, which you pay for. And yes, they don't take any commission, but you can spend $3,000 just hosting a 2-week exhibition.
Okay. How do you feel about that?
I haven't jumped on that bandwagon because I'm like, now I don't see how that's beneficial to the artist.
I would say the only way that I could see that being beneficial is if that takes place, let's say, at some kind of art convention where it is well known that people will go there to purchase art or something like that, or it's in an art district where, there's maybe exceptions, but your work better be
street traffic. It's, to me, unless you're extremely well known, but then again, you're represented by a gallery.
Yeah.
So
The game has changed.
Well, what I do like, and this kind of ties into the whole idea of self-publishing. So the traditional route was you send your manuscript, your baby, to 10 publishing houses in hopes that one might find time to read it within the next year, and it doesn't sit in a pile of, oh, here's the incoming. Then they publish it, they get royalties, but you actually have to, nowadays that's all changed. You actually have to have a decent following on Instagram before they'll look at you.
Right.
Some words of 50,000 followers. You have to do the publicity. Sure, they'll print it and they'll put it in bookstores and they'll give you a nice sort of launch, but you're basically doing all the hard work for them. And that's why I and a lot of other people choose to self-publish, because there is a tremendous amount of middlemen. And then there's also the vanity publishers. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Is that like Harlequins and stuff?
No, they're actually, there's ones like, I can't recall the names and I wouldn't say them on air anyway, but there's ones that will charge
vanity. I remember.
$5,000, and they will, print it and put it on their little website.
Yeah.
And then also, I believe, put it on Amazon for you.
It's a racket.
So you essentially you buy your own book.
Yep.
You pay $5,000 for your own book, which you could almost just do yourself. So that's, again, a totally different way. And now the book publishing industry is kind of like, hang on, there's a lot of self-publishers out there. And that's what I've done. I'm getting it printed in Australia. I'm getting them all sent to me, and then I distribute my book worldwide.
Yeah.
And for international orders is $74, and that includes postage. So in Australia, it's $50, free postage.
Yeah,
so
you just take care of it.
That's it. And one website, and if you want it that badly, come and get it. Girlcandraw.net. But I haven't decided, and I'm not saying that I won't, whether I will put it on Amazon or iBooks. That's down the road. The main thing was to get it printed, because I believe it's a book that needs to be held. I don't think it's an ebook.
It looks like a coffee table book. You know what I mean? Like the kind of book that...
Well, it's sort of like this. This is sort of, that's,
Yeah, no, it's big.
Well found. Geez, I must have been reading this quite a lot. It's got its beautiful, beautiful velvet cello varnish cover, and the pages are nice. And I think it gets lost a little bit as an ebook. So that's kind of the placement of the book. So that's all changed in the publishing world. And I did a lot of research. So the rat in me came out, and I was looking through, how am I going to do this? How will I promote it? And, I was just a busy little bee over Christmas working that stuff out. But you have to do it. You have to think about it. You don't letting other people do it is, come on, you can. I made my own video. Hey.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you did great. Well, here's the thing is, like, you do it all, and, depending on, let's say, how well things go, how high your aspirations are, etc. I mean, admittedly, you can grow your own team. Like, you can get people doing certain things for you, but then it's like, that's you as a leader, as a creative person too. And I mean, I'm in the state where I do basically everything myself, but my wife, she films me. If I'm a videographer by trade, but if I am on camera, my wife films me. My wife is part of my team, and we've been working together quite a bit. She's getting better and better. I couldn't make the videos I make without her. And so, like, getting her on board's a lot easier, let's say, than strangers. But there have been times now that I'm getting where, like, people are offering to help or calling, working with the same people again and again for a certain aspect of a video or something. And eventually, if you make enough money doing what you do, you might be like, okay, I'm going to hire somebody they're going to help me. I don't know. They're going to screen my emails or my calls or something. Like, there's a million things that you could have someone do, but
they'll get my people to contact your people.
Yeah, but it's like you don't have to worry about that until you have to worry about that. And the traditional model just isn't the same. So I want to dive in with the last bit of time we have here, just a little bit more into the mental health side of things, because I'm eternally fascinated by how people like you don't go crazy out of their minds, because it seems like the pursuit of art is such a such a small chance of success. It's so work intensive. Often a lot of people don't understand, or they take for granted like what you do. There's, in my experience at least, it's a challenging mental place to be at times. And I wonder, like, you strike me in this conversation and our conversation before that, like, you just seem really well balanced. Like, you're fascinated by lots of different things. You
Yeah,
have a
very
life,
true.
you've got a life outside of your art.
Yes.
What's that balance like? Like, tell me just a bit about how you don't go crazy, or if when you do, how do you get out of it?
What I used to get crazy about was not being able to do art. So I could understand where my mom's frustration came from
Mm,
growing up. That used to make me very, very sad. And then when I talked to her about her art, I could see that she suppressed a lot.
mm,
And so I was very big on, I did a lot of self work in the 90s where I was very big on letting my feelings out and not suppressing and learning how to be angry, because I was always really nice. And that's not a healthy state to be in, like that niceness. So I'm a bit more authentic about how I vent and standing up when I should instead of being quiet, because that's the Libra part of me. You want to be liked. And
mm,
sometimes you have to be unpopular and make unpopular choices. So in terms of the mental health, yes, I did a big reset in the late 90s, and I had to go into very deep reflection and work on my 12 steps. And because I wasn't drawing at all.
hmm,
And I had a feeling that I wasn't being my authentic self at all. And I couldn't access any sort of connection to any spirituality. If that makes sense.
yeah.
And then I think the 2000s were about just trying out my new life and how to navigate relationships, because I had isolated myself a long time. And I wasn't isolating in an artistic way either, which is really bad for my soul. So, and I mean, one of the visions I had, funny enough, was one night I had woken up at 3 a.m. I don't know, it was just having one of my epic nightmares, which is a
Mm,
sign of not well. Things are
right.
not going well.
Stress. Yeah.
Really bad nightmares. They were just so horrifying and scary. And I kind of came out of this nightmare, and it was sort of just as the light was coming in the room. And I saw a figure at the end of my bed, I swear. But it wasn't a scary figure. It was a specter. It was just an outline, but it was sort of hazy. And it was, I was thinking, oh, I heard these words, wake up. And I was like, yeah, I'm awake. No, it's like, wake up. And that was for me a real sign, I think, to wake up to yourself.
Hmm.
Wake up, because you have one shot at this life. And what you're doing, the way you're living, is you're going to cut that short. So then, my moments of clarity came, and I started to change everything about my life, my health. I gave away cigarettes. I gave away booze. I gave away any sort of thing that was taking me away and keeping me busy.
Yeah.
And then I did a lot of meditation. And it wasn't until 2010 and that I went on a meditation retreat, which really helped me get in touch with my creative side. So for that 10 years, since 1997 to 2010, I was living clean, as it were. I was in a relationship which was coming to an end in 2010.
Yeah.
And I was dealing with stuff, and I was just working and just starting to feel like I needed to break free of that relationship. It had helped me, but it was time to end it. And that's when I went to this retreat and I carved my first Buddha head. And I still have it. And a picture of it's in the book. And that was like, oh my God, like my soul just awoke. So I didn't feel that insane again. The insanity I had in the late 90s. And that was just not being in touch with my creativity and being just an emotional isolationist mess.
Interesting.
Just not asking for help and trying to do everything on my own, but really very, very lonely. I didn't have any substantial relationships for, the 90s. There wasn't anything of any depth. And so until I sort of cleansed myself, I couldn't be a friend to anybody, and I wasn't being a friend to myself. And once I embraced more meditation and prayer, people found that the light in my eyes came back, and that honestly, I can say, Spencer, that people literally smile at me on the street now, strangers. My girlfriend says, "What is going on with you?" We were walking the other day. She said, "Everyone smiles at you." I know. I said, random people just grin at me. She said, "It's because you're so open. You are such an open, inviting person that you get these smiles." And it is a beautiful thing. And I pray that people feel that, what I feel. Because a lot of people don't get smiles when they're on the street.
Well, it's really interesting that you would go through, like, that sounds like a real trial of, you said a lot of angst started from like not getting enough time to be creative. And then it seems like part of that went into sleep mode because you maybe buried it with some, negativity and bad habits and all the rest. And I like that, powerful image, vision, metaphor for waking up, and how so many of us can be in a trance and asleep for years, often for like silly reasons or things that, when you look back, you go, man, like, I just needed to tweak my perspective. I just needed to open up more. I just needed to talk this out. And I also like how you mentioned relationships, like figuring that stuff out. I think that what I'm kind of getting out of this is like, there is a whole health that is more than just, your creative self, like your physical health, your emotional, spiritual, relational, all of these things have interplay, very, very valuable interplay with your creativity. And your creativity has interplay with those other things as well, right? So, yeah, it's like you need to be able to heal all parts of you. And the focus on creativity and the lack thereof that you had was too narrow of thinking, right? It was like, no,
A lot of it was killing me.
yeah.
And I just think my higher power said, we've got bigger plans for you. You are going to draw and bring joy to the world, despite yourself. Like, despite all your, I didn't even know that. But as they say in the 12-step program, don't leave till the miracle happens. And I couldn't believe it. What miracle? Like, and then I look at my artwork and I think that's the miracle. That's the joy I was meant to bring. And when the only other time I get sort of creatively insane is if I'm doing a commission, because when I draw for myself, whatever, I just draw, I draw pretty pictures and it can be full of mistakes and whatever. But when I'm doing a commission, that can be a lot of pressure because first of all, the person has to like it. You want to do them justice. You've got a time constraint usually.
Yeah.
And they can ask for multiple changes. So you've got to be a bit agile. You've got to practice diplomacy, but also respect that they're the client.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many people get the shits, as it were, and say, "Oh no, this is my art. I am not changing a thing. Don't you talk."
I love it. It's a French person.
And I, And so I do counsel in the book that if you are going to do digital art or whatever, a lot of digital art is all about, we're going to change that background and you can do it quickly.
Yeah.
But if I'm drawing something, I have to start again. That's,
Yeah.
the background be already painted.
Well, that's
and I'm
why.
not change it again.
Yeah.
Or am I?
Well, and personality, like when people go to you for a commission, this is like where some of the modern branding is kind of on point, is the idea of you're kind of selling yourself in a way. And why that's great is, if I were to go to you and say, Marta, I'd love for you to draw me something to do with me and my wife or whatever, like whatever the commission was.
Yes.
The goal, like the hope is that I have fallen in love with your style and your work and stuff, and then I'm just going to be hands off and say, okay, this is kind of what I'm thinking.
Yes.
This is the subject, and then you do your thing, and I'm just gonna love it. And that is, I think, that the hope for any like freelancing artist or something like that. Like people approach me for like production once in a while, and it's like, just do your thing because we like your thing, whatever it is, and that's amazing. And you're right. Digital art has a lot more flexibility. You can just pop things in and out.
Yeah, it's often used for that because it's quick to switch and stuff. What I tend to do is like, I think people see my work, so it's attraction rather than promotion. They already feel a synergy, a connection, and there's trust, to trust that this person will, because a lot of commission portraits are rejected. Believe it or not, there's quite a few people going, no, I hate it. What are you thinking of?
I guess
it
so.
happens, and I've heard it quite a few times in my old Facebook group, and they didn't like it. So what I've learned is I send progress sketches and partial painted bits. So there's no surprise at the end, because the unveiling should be the culmination. And that's just the way I work, because I've learned that I think people like to be involved in the process. And then when they get the whole thing, they see it in toto, as it were.
Yeah.
And that's how I found to manage how far I'm going. Now, I worked with a Belgian lace maker. It was a fabulous job drawing his lace on designs that brides would bring in. So they'd bring in a photo of this gown, say, I love this gown. I'm going to have a seamstress make it. And he would sell them the lace to go on the top or whatever. It was an exquisite commission. And I had many times where he was such a master of understanding lace, because his family had been involved in it for 300 years. So he kind of knew the stuff.
Okay.
And he was the son of the great son of the owner and the great grandparents and all that.
Yeah.
Anyway, he'd gone into it and he knew what he didn't know about silk does not exist. So he'd say to me, the silk you have drawn looks too heavy for what the silk is. So he knew by the way I had drawn the hem, the hem over here, the hem, that it wasn't floaty enough. So I learned to send him many little progress sketches to say, okay, is this perfect? He'd say, that's exactly right. So I learned a lot, and he was pedantic, but he was a customer.
Yeah.
And I would have to do 2 or 3 versions, and it was part of the deal. And that I was like, thank you so much for your feedback. I really learned a lot. Instead of, no, I was right. Well, I wasn't right.
Yeah. You got to take your pride and your ego out of it. And
yes,
I have a lot of, I've heard some things, like as I kind of talk to more and more people who have, let's say, bigger followings, or they're kind of more entrenched in certain industries. I've been learning that there's a lot of divas out there. There are a lot of people, even like artists, like who just, I did it this way, and then they cost a lot of money too, and they don't want to make any changes and stuff like that. And so that, to me, seems like a miscommunication more than anything. I understand you could have a picky client or something, and that could be painful, but yeah, there's expectation, communication, and being able to work in progress. Yeah.
figure out what is expected to begin with, because that sort of bad will kind of hangs around.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been a couple of times where I have made progress on a sketch, and I could see that the person was deviating far too much from my style, even though I had to say, I'm sorry, I can't continue because I think we're just never going to meet up. And that was easier. And they appreciated that. I said, I'd love to. Or I had some rather large, important, world famous client contact me through an agent that I use in Melbourne. And I had to be honest and say, you know what? I could do digital live sketching, but I'm not there yet. And my friends went, you said no? You said no to this cat? I said, much better, I be honest. There's lots of people who could do that work, but I wasn't going to give them the product that they wanted. And I'm not ready for it yet. And I was egoless enough to admit that.
It's a fine balance.
You can't learn something like that in 2 weeks prior to the deadline. It's stress of that one.
If it's something you could have, I'm sure you would have jumped on it. You'd have been like, you know what?
I would have needed to do it. It was great. But I just said, I'm sorry, I can't do that.
Well, I love that. I love that much. Like, this is such a balance of like practical advice for freelancers and commissioners and stuff. Give me what would be like your final word here for noting that my audience is full of creative people who are really interested in creativity, and they're from various kinds of disciplines. What's a big takeaway for you in your life as a creative that you'd just like to put out there?
Oh, okay. Well, I think when I've been writing the book, and I have a chapter on success. So I've defined success as my ability to connect with people. That's what I think my art is about. And I found portrait work to be a very satisfying way to do that. And to hand over a painting of a cat or somebody's house or whatever, and they have tears in their eyes. There's nothing that can beat that. But I also feel that doing the work, putting the hard yards in, practice your hands. If you're drawing hands, practice.
Yeah.
Because the hands make break a fashion drawing, let me tell you. And stick to your strengths. So I've got, I'm very grateful for my gift, but I have my limits. So I work to my strengths. I try not to do what everybody else is doing. I don't like fads. I think they come and go. There was a time when everybody was drawing these paintings that had drips coming down the face, and I knew it was a fad. So just keep going on your path and build up that sort of portfolio of your stuff, and be very curious and not stuck into one thing. As I always say, be grateful for your gift and try and share, mentor other people. If you're older, try and mentor other people, which I really love to do, mentor young artists. And I'm not getting too hung up on what Instagram's doing, whether you're going to sell the next painting, because I think that really eats away at you. Just live your life. If you need to work part-time, if that's going to free up. I was talking to one artist saying, I don't want to get anything done. I said, work part-time. Can you work part-time? Because then you can get more yeses into your weekend by working Monday to Thursday. You have opportunity to say yes on Thursday. Things open up. The universe is not like a vacuum.
Right.
It will fill your free days with stuff. So there is a way to gain more, to claw back some more of that art time that you need, because we all have to work. No one wants to go hungry, and this notion that you have to be a starving artist, forget that.
Yeah, be a sane artist.
Be insane. That will drive you insane quicker than anything, is forcing your artwork, forcing your art to pay your bills. It's the other way around. getting enough money to pay your bills frees up you to be an artist, frees up your art, because that's very stressful to worry about money.
Yeah, and I'd add on to that for artists who are able to pay their bills through their art, most often that I see, they are still doing their art on the side that has nothing to do with their commission, and then they feel like they're hustling because, like, okay, so
Yes.
they're getting commission work and it's great and it's exciting and it's good, but it's not really 100% the thing that speaks to them, and so they're hustling their ass making time for the thing that speaks to them. And then for some lucky, gifted, hardworking individuals, once in a while they get to that spot where that's the thing that is their passion, 100% is what pays the bills. But I hate to see the pursuit of that in exchange for the sanity of today, because there's a lot to love about whatever your situation is. And if you're working a part-time job, if you're working a full-time job, you've got kids, like whatever's going on in your life, allow the creativity, hustle it as you can in your free time, but it
Yes.
should be adding to the richness of your life and not taking away. So,
Well, I also think that, what was I going to say about the whole commission thing as well, is be very careful about doing what you love. Now, I know that's counterintuitive because your passion can become your poison.
ooh,
Because if you want to draw bridges, I know for a fact that I was drawing a certain something and I was like, this is becoming a prison. I'm not liking this at all. So be very careful that too much of a good thing becomes a job. So you have these dreams that you might want to draw these bridges and you might want to do this. And all of a sudden you're doing 9 to 5 bridges. And guess what happens to your passion? It's a chore. So that, this whole thing, do what you love is nice. And that's very motivating. But sometimes it's better to do what you love part-time so that you don't kill it,
Oh, that's
Keep it
great.
going, keep it fresh. Keep yourself doing challenges outside of your paid work. Just do it. Do your life drawing or whatever that you have to do. That keeps, or recording your own stuff. And don't be bitter. Oh, please, people, don't be bitter. You're gifted, and that most accountants sitting in their offices would love to be gifted, but I think they're gifted with numbers. So
Yeah,
I can't really say.
But there's a lot of people who would love the gifts of creativity, as we commonly understand them, things in the visual arts
That's
and
right.
musical. A lot of people would love that. Yeah.
Why am I an artist? A stroke of fate, genetic lottery. There's nothing. What do I say? There's nothing. People always used to say to me, "Well, aren't you clever?" I'm like, no, not really clever. I'm just lucky. So there's nothing clever about what I've done. If there's anything clever, it's that I've managed to bring it to the world. That's the clever part.
Yeah.
The fact that I've actually managed to parlay it into something that's an income.
Mm-hmm.
That's clever. But drawing per se is like musical talent or that talent with numbers. We all get something. It's just doing something that's important.
I love that. And I think that's where we're going to end.
Oh,
absolutely. So, Marta, thank you for coming on to the podcast.
That's great.
Yeah. Where can people find your stuff? I already pulled it up at one point, but where would be the best place for people to go and connect with you?
Well, if they want to actually purchase the book, which is out in May, it's at girlcandraw.net.
That's easy.
And yep. And then if you want to see my website, it's drawntofashion.com.au in Australia. So it's drawn and then TO and then fashion, because I thought I'm very drawn to fashion.
That's also a clever name, Drawn to Fashion.
I couldn't believe nobody had that website. Amazing. So, and then of course there's girl can draw full stop. No, girl can full stop draw net on Instagram. girlcan.draw. Because funny enough, there were 4 other Girl Can Draws names on Instagram.
But can they?
They're 8 years old. Each of them are 10 and 8.
Oh, well, that's great.
I followed them.
Oh, really?
I thought they haven't posted since 2016. I'm like, do anybody want to relinquish your name?
That's funny. Well, that's
Well,
great.
I followed them anyway. That's was nice. And they could draw, but they only posted 3 things. So I'm like, Anyway, it's been so lovely to chat.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. If you found any of this valuable, please consider subscribing, recommending this to a friend, or leaving a positive review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you happen to be listening. If you watch this on my Servant YouTube channel or Facebook page, please leave a comment and share. I love to hear from my listeners and learn from them. Learn more about me at www.servant.com. That's SRVENT.com. Thank you again for your time. Now go be creative and sane.